The scream that tore from Thomas Tucker's throat when he saw the pale hand dangling from beneath his porch would have woken half the town of Placitas, New Mexico, if the wind hadn't been howling so fiercely that October morning in 1883. He stumbled backward, his coffee cup shattering against the wooden planks of his front step, brown liquid spreading like blood across the weathered boards. His heart hammered against his ribs as he approached cautiously, dropping to his knees to peer into the darkness beneath the raised foundation of his modest ranch house. A woman lay curled on her side, her body small and still against the packed earth. Her dress, once perhaps a respectable shade of blue, was torn and filthy, covered in dust and what looked like days of hard travel. Dark hair spilled across her face, tangled with bits of dried grass and debris. For one terrible moment, Thomas thought she might be dead, but then he saw the shallow rise and fall of her chest. "Miss." His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Miss, can you hear me?" No response. Thomas crawled further under the porch, ignoring the dirt that covered his clean shirt and the spider webs that caught in his dark hair. Up close, he could see she was young, probably not much more than 20, with hollow cheeks that spoke of hunger and exhaustion. Her hands were scraped raw, fingernails broken and dirty. Whatever had brought her to sleep beneath his porch, it had not been a gentle journey. He reached out and touched her shoulder carefully. "Miss, you need to wake up now." Her eyes flew open, and Thomas found himself staring into the most striking green eyes he had ever seen. They were wide with terror, and she scrambled backward like a cornered animal, her back hitting one of the support beams with a hollow thud. "Please," she gasped, her voice hoarse and cracking. "Please do not hurt me. I will leave right away. I am so sorry. I just needed somewhere safe for one night." Thomas held up both hands, keeping his distance. "I am not going to hurt you, but you cannot stay under there. Come out, please. Let me help you." She stared at him with those frightened eyes, clearly weighing her options. She looked like she might bolt at any second, but where would she go? Finally, slowly, she began to crawl toward the opening. Thomas backed out and stood, offering his hand when she emerged into the morning light. She did not take it, pulling herself up on her own and swaying dangerously once she was upright. Thomas instinctively reached out to steady her, but she flinched away from his touch. Up close, in the dawn light, he could see bruises on her arms, old ones fading to yellow and green. "When did you last eat?" he asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, then seemed to give up on lying. 3 days ago, a woman in Socorro gave me some bread." Socorro was nearly 60 miles south. She had walked that far without food. "Come inside," Thomas said, his voice gentle but firm. "I will make you breakfast. Then we can figure out what to do next." "I should go," she said, but her eyes drifted toward his front door with such naked longing that Thomas felt something twist in his chest. "You should eat," he countered. "Whatever you are running from, you will not get far on an empty stomach. Give me 1 hour. If you want to leave after that, I will not stop you." She hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Thomas led her inside, acutely aware of how she kept several feet between them at all times, her body tense to run. His house was simple but clean, a 2-room structure with the main living area combining kitchen and sitting space, and his bedroom separated by a door. He had built it himself 3 years ago when he decided to start his ranch, raising cattle on the land he had saved for years to buy. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the 2 chairs at his small table. She sat on the very edge, hands clasped in her lap, looking ready to bolt at the slightest provocation. Thomas moved to the stove and began preparing eggs and bacon, slicing thick pieces of bread from the loaf he had baked 2 days prior. He worked in silence, giving her time to calm down, though he could feel her eyes on him the entire time. When the food was ready, he set a full plate in front of her along with a glass of milk. "Thank you," she whispered, staring at the food like she could not quite believe it was real. "Eat slowly," Thomas warned. "Your stomach will not take kindly to gulping it down if it has been empty that long." She nodded and began to eat, clearly trying to pace herself but struggling against her hunger. Thomas sat across from her with his own plate, eating without really tasting anything. Now that the initial shock had worn off, questions were flooding his mind. Who was she? Where had she come from? What was she running from? As if reading his thoughts, she spoke between bites. "My name is Violet, Violet Morgan." "Thomas Tucker," he replied. "Most people call me Tom, though." "Mr. Tucker," she said formally, not meeting his eyes. "I truly am sorry for trespassing on your property. I arrived late last night and I was so tired I could not walk another step. Your porch seemed safe. Where are you headed?" "Anywhere but where I came from." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Thomas took a sip of his coffee, studying her over the rim of his cup. "That is not much of a plan. It is the only one I have." She looked up at him then, and he saw a fierce determination burning beneath the fear in her eyes. "I will not go back. I would rather die out in the desert than go back to him. So there was a man involved." Thomas felt anger kindle in his chest at the thought of someone putting those bruises on her arms, that terror in her eyes. "Your husband?" he asked carefully. "My father," she spat the word like a curse. "Though calling him that seems too generous. He sold me, Mr. Tucker, sold me like cattle to a man 3 times my age who wanted a young wife to warm his bed and bear his children. I was supposed to marry him last week, but I ran instead." Thomas set down his cup slowly, processing this information. It happened, he knew. Out here in the territories, where law was scarce and money scarcer, some men saw their daughters as commodities. It made him sick to think about. "This man your father promised you to, will he come looking for you?" Violet nodded, her face pale. "Marcus Brennan. He has money and influence, and he does not like being made a fool of. My father will have told him which way I went. I tried to cover my tracks, but I am not trained in such things." "Brennan," Thomas repeated, the name unfamiliar. "He from Socorro. Las Cruces. My father owns a shop there, such as it is. Mostly he drinks and gambles away what little money we have." Her hands tightened around her fork. "When Brennan offered him $500 for me, he could not sign the agreement fast enough. $500. Thomas's anger grew hotter. He made an honest living with his cattle, but that was more than he saw in a year. To think of a human being sold for such a sum made his blood boil. "You cannot keep running forever," he said gently. "Not on foot, not without supplies or money. You will die out there, or worse, someone will find you who does not have your best interests at heart." "I know," Violet whispered, and for the first time tears began to slide down her dirty cheeks. "But what else can I do? I have nowhere to go. No family who would take me in, no friends with means to help. I thought maybe if I could make it to Santa Fe, I could find work, disappear into a bigger town where no one would know to look for me." Santa Fe was still 70 miles north, through difficult terrain and past several rough settlements. Thomas knew without a doubt that Violet would never make it that far alone. He made a decision then, one that would change both their lives forever, though he did not know it yet. "Stay here," he said. Violet's eyes went wide. "What? Stay here?" Thomas repeated, his voice firm. "I have land, a house, cattle that need tending. I could use help around the place. You can work for me, earn your keep, and have a safe place to sleep and regular meals. If anyone comes looking for a young woman traveling alone, they will not think to look for a ranch hand living on a cattle spread." "Mr. Tucker, I cannot possibly—" "You can, and you will," he interrupted. "Unless you truly want to die out there in the desert. Because that is what will happen, Miss Morgan. Make no mistake about that. She stared at him for a long moment, those green eyes searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "I do not have money to pay you back," she said. "Not for room and board." "Did I ask for money?" "You will work. That is payment enough. I have been meaning to get some help anyway, and most ranch hands I would hire would eat twice as much as you and probably smell worse too." A ghost of a smile flickered across her face before vanishing. "You do not know me. I could be a thief or worse. Are you?" "No." "Then I suppose I will take my chances." Thomas stood and began clearing the plates. "There is a wash basin in the corner there, and I have some old clothes that might fit you well enough until we can get you some proper things. Get cleaned up, then rest. You look dead on your feet." "Where will I sleep?" Violet asked, glancing toward the single-bedroom door. Thomas had been thinking about that while she ate. His house was small, only 2 rooms. Having her sleep in his bedroom while he took the floor was not appropriate, and the reverse was equally unsuitable. She needed privacy, safety, a space of her own. "For tonight you take the bed," he said. "I will sleep out here, but tomorrow I am going to build you a proper room." "Build me a room," Violet repeated, as if she had not heard him correctly. "I have materials left over from when I built this place. Enough for a small addition. It will not be fancy, but it will be yours. A door that locks from the inside, a window for light, enough space for a bed and a trunk." "You need to feel safe here, Miss Morgan. You cannot do that without your own space." Violet stood slowly, and Thomas saw her eyes had filled with tears again. "Why are you being so kind to me? You do not even know me." Thomas thought about his answer carefully. "My mother," he finally said. "She ran away from a bad situation when she was about your age. She ended up in Missouri, working in a boarding house, barely surviving. My father met her there when he was passing through with a cattle drive. He saw she needed help, so he gave her a job on his ranch. They fell in love and got married a year later. I suppose you could say I am repaying a debt for the kindness shown to her." It was the truth, though not the whole truth. The whole truth was that when he looked at Violet Morgan, with her bruised arms and terrified eyes and fierce determination to survive, he saw someone worth saving. Someone who deserved better than what life had dealt her. "Your mother, is she still alive?" Violet asked. "No. Fever took her 6 years ago. My father followed her 2 years after that. His heart just gave out one day. I think he could not stand being without her." Thomas moved toward the bedroom and opened the door. "Get some rest. You are safe here. I promise you that." Violet walked slowly into the bedroom, pausing at the threshold. "Mr. Tucker, thank you. I will work hard. I will not make you regret this." "I know you will. And call me Tom, please. Mr. Tucker makes me feel ancient." She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her whole face despite the dirt and exhaustion. "Tom." After she closed the door, Thomas stood in his main room, looking around at the space and mentally calculating what he would need to build a proper addition. He had timber, nails, tools. He had strong arms and the knowledge his father had taught him about construction. What he did not have was time, but he would make time. By week's end, Violet Morgan would have a room of her own. He just hoped that would be enough to keep her safe when the men inevitably came looking. The sound of hammer on nail rang out across Thomas's property for the next 5 days straight. He worked from dawn until dusk, taking breaks only to tend to his cattle and prepare meals. Violet helped where she could, holding boards steady while he nailed them in place, fetching tools, sweeping up sawdust. She did not talk much those first few days, but Thomas could see her gradually beginning to relax. The tight set of her shoulders eased slightly. She flinched less when he moved too quickly near her. On the 3rd day, she ventured to ask him questions while they worked. How long have you had this ranch? 3 years now. I worked on my father's spread in Texas until he passed, then sold it and came out here to start fresh. The land was cheaper and there was room to grow. Thomas lined up another board and began nailing it into place. It has been hard work, but good work, honest work. You have hired hands. One, Miguel. He comes by 3 times a week to help with the cattle. Good man, knows his business. His family has a farm about 5 miles east. Will he object to me being here? Thomas paused in his hammering and looked at her. Why would he? Violet shrugged, not meeting his eyes. I am a single woman living on your property. People talk. Let them talk. Miguel minds his own business and anyone else can think what they like. You are my employee, nothing more or less. Anyone who suggests otherwise will have me to answer to. She ducked her head, but not before he saw the relief on her face. By the 5th day, the room was complete. It was small, perhaps 10 feet by 12, but it had solid walls, a door with a lock, and a window that looked out over the grasslands to the east. Thomas had built a simple bed frame and filled a mattress tick with fresh straw. He brought in an old trunk for her clothes, a small table, and a chair. It was spare, but it was private and safe. It is perfect, Violet said when he showed it to her. She ran her hand along the windowsill, her eyes bright. I have never had a room of my own before. Growing up, I shared a space with my 2 sisters. They are younger, still at home. It was the first time she had mentioned siblings. Do you miss them? Thomas asked. Every day, but I could not take them with me. They are only 12 and 14, too young for such a journey. I hope they will understand why I left. Her voice cracked slightly. I hope they will forgive me for abandoning them. You did not abandon them. You saved yourself. There is a difference. Is there? Because I still feel like I ran away and left them to face my father's anger. Thomas wanted to tell her that she had done the right thing, that staying would have helped no one, but he sensed she needed time to come to peace with her choices. Instead, he changed the subject. Tomorrow, we need to ride into town for supplies. You will need proper clothes, boots, things of your own. I can advance you the money against your wages. Violet bit her lip. Is it safe to go into town? Placida's is small, just a few hundred people. Most of them are good folks. We will be careful, keep a low profile. But you cannot hide here forever and you need supplies. She nodded slowly. All right, but if there is trouble, there will not be. I will keep you safe, Violet. I gave you my word. The next morning, they hitched up Thomas's wagon and made the 7-mile journey into Placida's. The town was indeed small, consisting of a main street with perhaps a dozen buildings, a general store, a saloon, a church, a small hotel, a blacksmith, and various other establishments. It was quiet that morning, with only a handful of people moving about their business. Thomas tied up the wagon outside the general store and helped Violet down. She kept close to him as they entered, her eyes darting around nervously. The proprietor, a round woman named Mrs. Henshaw, looked up from her counter with a friendly smile. Tom Tucker, as I live and breathe. Been a month since we saw you in town. How are those cattle of yours? Doing well, Mrs. Henshaw. I need to pick up some supplies today, and my new ranch hand here needs proper work clothes. Mrs. Henshaw's eyes went to Violet, widening slightly in surprise. Ranch hands were usually men, but she was too professional to comment. Of course, dear. Let me show you what I have. You look about a size or 2 smaller than my daughter. I should have some things that will fit. While Mrs. Henshaw led Violet to the back of the store where the clothing was kept, Thomas gathered the other supplies he needed: coffee, flour, sugar, beans, salt pork. He was examining a new coil of rope when the door opened and 2 men walked in. Thomas's muscles tensed automatically. He did not recognize them, and strangers in a town this size were notable. Both men were dressed well, too well for ranch work. One was older, perhaps in his 50s, with gray hair and cold blue eyes. The other was younger, maybe 25, with the cocky bearing of someone used to getting his way. They looked around the store with obvious disdain. "Excuse me," the older man said to Mrs. Henshaw when she emerged from the back. "We are looking for a young woman who may have passed through this area. Dark hair, green eyes, about 20 years old. She ran away from home, and her family is very worried about her." Thomas's blood ran cold. He kept his back turned, pretending to be absorbed in his examination of the rope. "Can't say I have seen anyone like that," Mrs. Henshaw said, her tone cautious. "We do not get many strangers passing through." "She is a disturbed girl," the younger man said. "Not right in the head, prone to flights of fancy and telling lies. Her father hired us to bring her home safely before she hurts herself or someone else." "I see," Mrs. Henshaw said, clearly not believing a word of it. "Well, if I see her, I will be sure to let the sheriff know." The older man's eyes narrowed. "We would prefer you let us know directly. We are staying at the hotel. Name is Brennan, Marcus Brennan." Thomas's hand tightened on the rope. So this was the man who thought he had bought Violet. His anger from days ago came roaring back, hot and fierce. "I will keep that in mind," Mrs. Henshaw said diplomatically. The two men looked around the store once more, their eyes passing over Thomas without interest, then left. Thomas waited until their footsteps had faded before turning to Mrs. Henshaw. "They are lying," he said quietly. "That girl they are looking for, she is not disturbed or dangerous. She is running from a forced marriage." Mrs. Henshaw nodded. "I figured as much. Men like that do not hire bounty hunters for a girl who is just not right in the head. Is she safe?" "She is with me. I found her on my property and gave her work. But they will be looking, and I need to keep her hidden until they give up and move on. You are a good man, Tom Tucker. Your parents would be proud." Mrs. Henshaw glanced toward the back of the store. "Let me get her what she needs, and you two get out of town quickly." "I will not say a word to anyone. Thank you." Violet emerged a few minutes later with an armful of clothing. 2 practical work dresses, a split riding skirt, a warm coat, sturdy boots, and various undergarments. Her face was flushed with embarrassment at the expense, but Thomas waved away her concerns as he paid Mrs. Henshaw. "You need proper gear. Cannot have you working in rags." They loaded everything into the wagon and started back toward the ranch. Thomas kept his eyes on the road behind them, watching for any sign of pursuit. Violet noticed his tension. "Something happened in the store," she said. It was not a question. Thomas did not see the point in lying. "2 men came in asking about you. Marcus Brennan and someone else, probably hired to help track you down. They are staying at the hotel." Violet's face went white. "He is here. He actually came after me." "He will not find you," Thomas said firmly. "You stay close to the ranch from now on. If you need to go outside, stay within sight of the house. Miguel will be by tomorrow. I will tell him to keep an eye out for strangers. What if he does not give up? What if he keeps looking? Then we will deal with it when the time comes. But I will not let him take you, Violet. You have my word on that." They rode the rest of the way in silence. When they reached the ranch, Thomas helped her carry her new things into her room, then checked and rechecked the locks on all the doors and windows. That night, he loaded his rifle and kept it close, sleeping lightly, waking at every small sound. The next morning, Miguel arrived as expected. He was a lean man in his 40s with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes. Thomas took him aside and explained the situation in low tones. Miguel listened without interrupting, then nodded. "I will keep watch," he said in his accented English. "My sons, they will help. If these men come to the ranch, we will see them coming. I appreciate it, friend." Miguel glanced toward the house, where Violet was visible through the window, washing dishes. She is lucky to have found you. Not many men would take such a risk for a stranger. Seems like the right thing to do. Perhaps, but right and easy are rarely the same thing. Over the following week, life on the ranch settled into a cautious routine. Violet proved herself a quick learner and a hard worker. She helped with the chickens Thomas kept, gathered eggs, tended the vegetable garden, cooked meals, and mended clothes. She was quiet but not sullen, and sometimes Thomas would catch her humming while she worked. Miguel came by regularly, and his two sons, both in their 20s, took to riding the perimeter of Thomas's property, keeping an eye out for unwanted visitors. The community in Placitas was small, and word had spread quietly among trusted people that Tom Tucker had taken in someone who needed protecting. No one asked questions, but several neighbors found reasons to stop by, ostensibly to borrow tools or return favors, but really to make their presence known, to show that Thomas did not stand alone. It was this quiet network of support that allowed Violet to begin healing. The constant fear began to ease from her eyes. She smiled more often. She even laughed one afternoon when one of the chickens escaped its coop and led her on a ridiculous chase around the yard, Thomas eventually catching the bird and returning it with great ceremony. "You are terrible at catching chickens," Violet said, still laughing. "I raise cattle, not poultry. There is a significant difference in technique." Clearly. It was the first time Thomas had seen her truly relaxed, and the sight did something strange to his heart. He found himself noticing small things about her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The soft sound of her voice when she spoke to the animals. The strength in her hands despite their small size. He told himself it was just concern, just wanting to see her safe and happy after all she had been through. But he was beginning to suspect it was more than that. 2 weeks after the trip into town, trouble arrived. Thomas was out checking on a section of fence that needed mending when he heard the sound of horses approaching the house. He straightened immediately, his hand going to the pistol he now wore whenever he was outside. 3 riders were coming up the path. Marcus Brennan, the younger man from the general store, and a third man Thomas did not recognize. He walked quickly back toward the house, arriving just as the men were dismounting. Violet must have heard them too because she appeared in the doorway, her face pale with fear. Thomas positioned himself between her and the visitors. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his voice neutral. Marcus Brennan was a large man, well-fed and prosperous-looking, with the kind of face that probably smiled often but showed no warmth in the eyes. He looked past Thomas to Violet, and his expression hardened. "There you are, my dear. Your father and I have been so worried." "I am not your dear," Violet said, her voice shaking but defiant. "And my father can go to the devil." Brennan's face darkened. "Mind your tongue, girl. I have been patient with this childish rebellion of yours, but my patience has limits. It is time to come home and fulfill your obligations." "The only obligation I have is to myself," Violet shot back. "I am not marrying you. I am not going anywhere with you. You signed a contract." "My father signed a contract. I signed nothing." Brennan took a step forward and Thomas moved to block him. "The lady has made her position clear. She is not going with you. Now I suggest you get back on your horses and leave my property." "Your property?" Brennan looked Thomas up and down with contempt. "And who are you exactly? Some cowboy she is spreading her legs for in exchange for shelter." Thomas's fist connected with Brennan's jaw before he consciously decided to throw the punch. The older man went down hard, blood spurting from his split lip. The other 2 men moved forward immediately, but Thomas already had his pistol drawn. "Do not," he said quietly. Just do not." They froze. Behind Thomas, he heard Violet gasp, but he did not take his eyes off the men in front of him. Brennan climbed to his feet, wiping blood from his mouth. "You just made a very big mistake, cowboy. Do you have any idea who I am? What I can do to you?" "I know what you tried to do to her, and that is all I need to know. Now get off my land before I decide that warning shot needs to be aimed a little lower. This is not over. I paid good money for that girl, and I will have what I am owed. She is not property to be bought and sold. She is a human being with rights of her own. Now leave." Brennan stared at Thomas for a long moment, rage burning in his eyes. Finally, he turned and mounted his horse. "You will regret this," he said. "Both of you will regret this." They rode away, and Thomas did not lower his pistol until they were out of sight. Only then did he turn to Violet, who was shaking violently, tears streaming down her face. "I am sorry," she said. "I am so sorry. He will make trouble for you now. He has money and connections." He can try," Thomas interrupted gently. "Come inside. You are safe." But even as he said it, he knew the trouble was far from over. That night, Thomas sat at his table, cleaning his rifle while Violet sat across from him, silent and withdrawn. She had not eaten dinner, could barely look at him. He knew she was blaming herself for bringing this danger to his door. "I should leave," she finally said. "Before he comes back with the sheriff or a judge or whatever else he plans to use against you. You are not leaving." "Tom, you do not understand. Men like Marcus Brennan, they do not stop. They do not give up. He will find a way to hurt you for what you did today. He will probably lie to the authorities, claim you kidnapped me or are holding me against my will. He could have you arrested. Then we will deal with it, together." Thomas set down his rifle and looked at her directly. "Violet, do you trust me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Then trust me when I say I am not letting you face this alone. I do not care what Brennan does or does not do. I do not care what it costs me. You are staying here where you are safe, and that is the end of it." "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you risk so much for me? You barely know me." Thomas considered his answer carefully. The truth was, he did know her, or at least he felt like he did. In the 2 weeks she had been on his ranch, he had seen her courage, her kindness, her strength. He had seen the way she gentled the animals, the care she took with every task, the determination in her eyes when she faced her fears. He had seen enough to know that Violet Morgan was someone special, someone worth fighting for. But more than that, somewhere along the way, his concern for her had deepened into something else. Something he was not quite ready to name but could no longer ignore. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said, which was true but not the whole truth. "Now go get some rest. Tomorrow I am riding into town to talk to the sheriff. Let him hear our side of things before Brennan can poison the well." Violet nodded and stood, pausing at the door to her room. "Tom, thank you for everything. I know I do not deserve such kindness, but I am grateful for it." "You deserve better than you have gotten from this world," Thomas said quietly. "I am just trying to even the scales a little." After she closed her door, Thomas sat alone in the darkness, thinking. He had never been much of a fighter, had always preferred to settle disputes with words rather than fists. But he would fight for Violet. He would do whatever it took to keep her safe, even if it meant going up against men with more money and power than he would ever have. The next morning, Thomas rode into Placida's alone, leaving Miguel at the ranch to watch over Violet. The sheriff's office was a small building near the center of town, and Sheriff William Carter was a man Thomas had known casually for 3 years. He was fair-minded but practical, more concerned with keeping the peace than pursuing absolute justice. Thomas explained the situation as clearly and honestly as he could. Sheriff Carter listened without interrupting, his weathered face neutral. "So this girl," the sheriff said when Thomas finished, "she is on your property voluntarily, completely voluntarily. She is working for me as a ranch hand in exchange for room and board. She is free to leave any time she wants." And this Marcus Brennan, he claims she is his property based on some agreement with her father. That is what he claims, yes. But Violet is 21 years old. Her father had no legal right to sell her into marriage, and she never agreed to any of it. She ran away to escape a situation she found intolerable. Sheriff Carter leaned back in his chair, rubbing his jaw. Legally speaking, it is complicated. If there was a formal betrothal contract with money exchanged, Brennan might have grounds for a breach of contract suit. But that is a civil matter, not a criminal one. As long as the girl is not being held against her will, there is nothing illegal about her staying on your ranch. So if Brennan comes to you demanding you arrest me or force her to go with him, I will tell him the same thing I am telling you. This is a civil matter. He can take it to a judge if he wants, but I am not going to drag a woman off to a man she does not want to be with unless a court orders me to. Relief flooded through Thomas. "Thank you, Sheriff. Do not thank me yet. Brennan has money, and money talks loud in this territory. He could very well find a judge willing to see things his way. My advice: get a lawyer. Make sure your side is heard in any legal proceedings." I appreciate your honesty." Thomas left the sheriff's office feeling slightly better but still uneasy. As he walked back to his wagon, he spotted Mrs. Henshaw sweeping the boardwalk outside her store. She gave him a small nod, and he tipped his hat in return. Whatever happened, he was not completely alone in this fight. The weeks that followed were tense, but quiet. Brennan did not return to the ranch, though Thomas heard he was still in town, making noise about legal action. Thomas hired a lawyer from Santa Fe, a young but sharp man named David Frost, who reviewed the situation and assured him that Violet had a strong case for her freedom. "She is over 18, legally an adult," Frost explained during his visit to the ranch. "Her father cannot force her into marriage, and any contract he signed regarding her is not binding without her consent. Brennan can try to sue for breach of contract, but he will be suing her father, not her, and even that is questionable legally. What if he claims I kidnapped her or am holding her against her will? Is he?" "No," Violet said firmly. She had insisted on being present for the meeting. "I am here by choice. Tom has been nothing but kind and respectful to me." Frost looked between them, and Thomas saw the lawyer's sharp eyes notice the way they sat close together, the way Violet looked at Thomas when she thought he was not watching. "Well then, we simply need documentation of that. Miss Morgan, I will need you to sign an affidavit stating you are here voluntarily and describing the circumstances that led you to leave your father's house. If this goes to court, that will be crucial evidence." Violet signed the document without hesitation, her hand steady. Thomas felt a surge of pride watching her. This young woman who had been so terrified and broken just weeks ago now facing down the threat of legal action with her head held high. As the lawyer prepared to leave, he pulled Thomas aside. "Mr. Tucker, I feel I should warn you. Cases like this, they can get ugly. Brennan may try to damage Miss Morgan's reputation, claim she is a woman of loose morals or mentally unstable. He may make accusations about the nature of your relationship. Are you prepared for that?" "I am prepared to do whatever it takes to keep her safe," Thomas said. Frost studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I thought you might say that. For what it is worth, I think you are doing a good thing here. We need more men willing to stand up for what is right, consequences be damned." After the lawyer left, Thomas and Violet stood together on the porch, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of distant pine forests. You think it will come to a trial? Violet asked quietly. I do not know. Maybe. But if it does, we will face it together. She looked up at him, and Thomas was struck by how much she had changed in the month since he found her under his porch. She had put on weight, her cheeks filling out with regular meals. Her hands were still work-roughened, but the cuts had healed. Most importantly, the fear that had haunted her eyes had faded, replaced by something else. Something that made Thomas's heart beat faster. Tom, can I ask you something? Anything? Why have you really done all this for me? Please do not say it is just because it is the right thing. I need to know the truth. Thomas took a deep breath. This was the moment, he realized. The moment where he could either keep hiding his feelings or be honest with her. The question was whether honesty would help or hurt her. The truth, he said slowly, is that it started out as just wanting to help someone in need. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that. Somewhere along the way, I started to care about you. Not just about your safety or your well-being, but about you. Who you are, what you think, what makes you laugh. I started to look forward to seeing you every morning, started to feel empty when you were not around. Violet's eyes were wide, her lips parted in surprise. Thomas continued, knowing he had to finish now that he had started. I am not saying this to pressure you or make you feel obligated to me. You owe me nothing, Violet. You are free to leave any time you want, free to feel however you want about me. But you asked for the truth, and that is it. I care about you. More than I probably should, given the circumstances. For a long moment, Violet said nothing. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were small and warm in his. I care about you too, she said softly. I have been trying to tell myself it was just gratitude or relief at being safe, but it is more than that. When I am with you, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in my life. You make me feel seen, valued, like I matter as a person and not just as someone's property or burden. You do matter, Thomas said, his voice rough with emotion. You matter to me. They stood there on the porch, hands clasped, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Thomas wanted to kiss her, wanted it more than he could remember wanting anything. But he held back. She had been through so much, had barely escaped one man who wanted to control her. The last thing he wanted was to rush her or make her feel pressured. As if reading his thoughts, Violet smiled. You can kiss me, if you want to. I do not want you to feel like you have to, Tom, she interrupted gently. I am telling you I want you to. I am giving you permission. I am asking you to, actually. So he did. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her softly, carefully, like she was something precious that might break. She made a small sound in the back of her throat and leaned into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. The kiss deepened, and Thomas felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of them, just this moment, just the taste and feel of her in his arms. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Violet was smiling. I have wanted you to do that for weeks. Why did you not say something? I was afraid. Afraid you only saw me as someone you were helping. Afraid that what I was feeling was not real, just some kind of emotional response to you saving me. And now I know it is real. This is real. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I am falling in love with you, Tom Tucker. I have been falling since the day you found me under your porch and offered me kindness instead of anger. I am falling in love with you too, Thomas admitted. Have been, probably since I saw you laugh at that damn chicken. Violet laughed, and the sound was like music. They kissed again, slower this time, sweeter. When they finally went inside for the night, it was to their separate rooms, but something fundamental had shifted between them. They were no longer just a rancher and his employee. They were something more, something that felt like the beginning of forever. The summons arrived 2 weeks later. Marcus Brennan had indeed taken the case to court, filing suit against both Violet and Thomas. He was demanding either that Violet fulfill the marriage contract or that he be compensated for the money he had paid her father, plus additional damages for humiliation and breach of contract. He was also accusing Thomas of alienation of affection and interfering in a legal agreement. David Frost arrived at the ranch the day after the summons to prepare them for the hearing. The good news is that the judge assigned to the case is Judge Morrison. He is known for being fair and not particularly impressed by money. The bad news is that Brennan has hired a very expensive lawyer from Las Cruces, someone with experience in contract law. "What do we need to do?" Thomas asked. "Tell the truth. All of it." "Miss Morgan, you will need to testify about why you left, about the circumstances of the alleged agreement between your father and Brennan. Mr. Tucker, you will need to explain how she came to be on your property and the nature of your relationship." Violet bit her lip. "Our relationship has changed since I first arrived. Tom and we have feelings for each other now." "Will that hurt the case?" "It might complicate things," Frost admitted. "Brennan's lawyer will likely try to paint it as proof that Mr. Tucker seduced you or convinced you to break the agreement for his own benefit. But honestly, if you two are courting, it also undermines Brennan's claim that you should be forced to marry him. A woman in love with another man has even more reason to refuse an unwanted marriage." "We will not lie about it," Thomas said firmly. "Whatever questions they ask, we tell the truth." The hearing was set for 3 weeks away in Santa Fe. Those weeks passed in a strange mixture of happiness and anxiety. Thomas and Violet grew closer every day. They took walks together in the evening, talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood, about her mother who had died when she was 12, about her sisters who she missed desperately. He told her about growing up on his father's ranch, about his dreams of building something lasting, about the loneliness he had felt before she arrived. They kissed often but went no further. Thomas was determined to do things properly, to court her the right way despite the circumstances. Violet seemed to appreciate his restraint even as she sometimes looked at him with heat in her eyes that made his pulse race. Miguel and his family had become regular fixtures at the ranch, providing both protection and companionship. Miguel's wife, Rosa, took Violet under her wing, teaching her to make tortillas and sharing recipes. His sons, Carlos and Diego, treated Violet like a younger sister, teasing her gently and making her laugh. The sense of community, of being surrounded by people who cared, helped ease some of the anxiety about the upcoming hearing. The night before they were set to leave for Santa Fe, Thomas could not sleep. He got up and went outside, standing on his porch and looking at the stars. He heard the door to Violet's room open, then her soft footsteps approaching. "Cannot sleep either?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. "Too much on my mind. Are you worried about tomorrow?" "I am worried about what happens if we lose, what Brennan might do, what the judge might order." He turned to look at her. "I am worried about losing you." Violet took his hand. "You will not lose me. No matter what the judge says, no matter what happens, I am not going with Marcus Brennan. I will run again if I have to. I will keep running until they stop chasing or until I die, but I will not let them force me into that marriage. It should not have to be that way. You should not have to choose between your freedom and your safety. I know, but that is the world we live in." She squeezed his hand. "Tom, if things go badly tomorrow, if the judge rules in Brennan's favor, I want you to let me go. Do not fight for me if it means losing everything you have worked for. Do not let him destroy you because of me. I will not abandon you. I am not asking you to abandon me. I am asking you to be smart. You cannot help me if you are in jail or if you lose your ranch." Thomas pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "Let us not borrow trouble. Maybe the judge will see reason. Maybe this will all work out the way it should." "Maybe," Violet said, but she did not sound convinced. They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, drawing strength from each other. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The courthouse in Santa Fe was an imposing adobe building in the center of town. Thomas, Violet, and David Frost arrived early, taking seats on one side of the courtroom. Marcus Brennan arrived shortly after with his lawyer, a thin man with cold eyes named Harrison Pierce. Brennan did not look at Violet, keeping his gaze fixed straight ahead. Judge Morrison entered, and everyone stood. He was a man in his 60s with iron gray hair and a stern face that gave nothing away. He took his seat and reviewed the papers before him. "This is a hearing regarding a complaint filed by Marcus Brennan against Violet Morgan and Thomas Tucker," he began. "Mr. Pierce, present your case." Pierce stood and began speaking in a smooth, practiced voice. He painted a picture of a legal agreement between Brennan and Violet's father. Money exchanged in good faith. A young woman who had been led astray by a cowboy with ulterior motives. He made Thomas sound like a predator who had taken advantage of a vulnerable woman for his own purposes. "The evidence is clear, Your Honor," Pierce concluded. "Mr. Brennan entered into a legal contract and fulfilled his financial obligations. Miss Morgan's father received compensation for his daughter's hand in marriage. The fact that Miss Morgan has changed her mind or been persuaded to break this agreement does not absolve her of her responsibilities. We are asking that she be compelled to honor the contract, or that she and her father be required to return the money paid, plus damages for breach of contract." Judge Morrison turned to Frost. "Your response." Frost stood, and Thomas was struck by how young he looked compared to Pierce. But when he spoke, his voice was confident and clear. "Your Honor, the foundation of Mr. Pierce's argument is that a contract exists binding Miss Morgan to marriage with Mr. Brennan. However, Miss Morgan never signed any such contract, never agreed to its terms, and was never given a choice in the matter. Her father sold her, Your Honor. Sold her like cattle or furniture to a man 3 times her age. This is not a breach of contract case. This is a case about whether a woman in the United States of America can be bought and sold like property." He paused, letting that sink in. "Miss Morgan is 21 years old, legally an adult. Under the laws of this territory and this nation, she has the right to choose who she marries. Her father had no legal authority to bind her to an agreement without her consent. Any money Mr. Brennan paid was his own foolish choice, but it does not grant him ownership of another human being." Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Mr. Pierce, do you have documentation showing that Miss Morgan agreed to this marriage?" "Her father's signature was sufficient under the circumstances," Pierce argued. "In many cases—" "I did not ask about other cases," the judge interrupted. "I asked if you have Miss Morgan's signature or any documentation showing her willing participation in this agreement." Pierce hesitated. "No, Your Honor. But then as far as I am concerned, there is no binding contract." Judge Morrison turned to Violet. "Miss Morgan, please stand." Violet stood, her face pale but composed. "Did you agree to marry Marcus Brennan?" the judge asked. "No, Your Honor. I did not even know about the arrangement until my father told me I was to be married in a week. When I objected, he said it was done, that Mr. Brennan had already paid, and I had no choice in the matter." "Did Mr. Brennan ever court you or ask for your hand in marriage directly?" "No, Your Honor. We met once briefly, a few weeks before my father told me I had been sold to him. Mr. Brennan looked at me like I was livestock he was considering purchasing. He never spoke to me, never asked me anything, just examined me and left. Thomas saw Brennan's face darken with anger at this characterization, but the man remained silent. "And why did you leave your father's house?" Judge Morrison asked. Violet lifted her chin. "Because I would rather die than marry a man I do not know or love, a man who thinks women can be bought and sold. I ran because it was my only choice, and I kept running until I found someone who treated me like a human being instead of property." The defendant, Mr. Tucker. "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Tucker, please stand and tell me how Miss Morgan came to be on your property." Thomas stood. "I found her sleeping under my porch one morning, Your Honor. She had walked nearly 60 miles with no food or supplies, and she was exhausted and starving. I gave her breakfast and offered her work on my ranch in exchange for room and board. I built her a private room with a lock on the door so she would feel safe. She has been working for me ever since, and she is free to leave any time she chooses." "And what is the nature of your relationship with Miss Morgan now?" Thomas met the judge's eyes steadily. "I love her, Your Honor, and if she will have me, I intend to marry her." "But that is her choice to make, not mine or anyone else's." A murmur went through the courtroom. Brennan's lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, this proves exactly what we have been saying. Mr. Tucker seduced Miss Morgan and convinced her to break her legal obligations. This is a clear case of alienation of affection. Alienation of affection requires that there was affection to alienate," Judge Morrison said dryly. "If Miss Morgan never agreed to marry Mr. Brennan and had no relationship with him, then Mr. Tucker cannot be accused of interfering in something that did not exist." He looked at Brennan directly. "Mr. Brennan, do you have anything to say?" Brennan stood, his face flushed with anger. "That girl is mine. I paid for her fair and square. Her father made an agreement and she should honor it. If every woman was allowed to just run away when she changed her mind, what would become of proper society? If proper society is built on forcing women into unwanted marriages, then perhaps it deserves to fall," Judge Morrison replied. "Mr. Brennan, your lawsuit is dismissed. Miss Morgan is not your property and never was. Any money you paid to her father is a matter between you and him. I suggest you pursue him for restitution if you feel wronged." Relief flooded through Thomas so powerfully he felt his knees weaken. Beside him, Violet made a small sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I am issuing an order restraining Mr. Brennan and any agents acting on his behalf from approaching, contacting, or harassing Miss Morgan in any way. If you violate this order, you will be arrested and prosecuted. Do I make myself clear?" Brennan's face was purple with rage, but he nodded stiffly. "This hearing is concluded." Judge Morrison banged his gavel. As the sound echoed through the courtroom, Violet turned and threw her arms around Thomas, tears streaming down her face. He held her tight, his own eyes burning. "It is over," she whispered. "It is really over." "It is over," he agreed. "You are free." They walked out of the courthouse into bright sunshine, and for the first time since Thomas had found Violet under his porch, the weight of fear and uncertainty lifted. They were free to build a life together, free to love each other without looking over their shoulders. On the ride back to Placida's, Violet sat close to Thomas on the wagon seat, her head resting on his shoulder. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now we go home," Thomas said. "And we start planning our future. Unless you have changed your mind about wanting to marry a simple cattle rancher." "I have not changed my mind about anything. You are the best man I have ever known, Tom Tucker, and I would be honored to be your wife. Then I suppose I should ask you properly." Thomas pulled the wagon to a stop on the side of the road. He climbed down and then helped Violet down, holding both her hands in his. "Violet Morgan, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my love for the rest of our days?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Thomas kissed her there on the side of the road, with the New Mexico sun beating down and the wind carrying the scent of sage and freedom. When they finally pulled apart, Violet was smiling so brightly it made his heart ache. "Let us go home," she said. "I want to tell Miguel and Rosa. I want to start planning. I want to begin our life together." "Whatever you want," Thomas promised, "for as long as we both shall live." The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the small church in Placitas. It was a simple affair, with Miguel and Rosa standing as witnesses and most of the town turning out to celebrate. Violet wore a dress Mrs. Henshaw had helped her make, a simple white cotton gown that made her look like an angel in Thomas's eyes. He wore his best suit, freshly pressed, his dark hair slicked back. The ceremony was short but heartfelt. When the minister asked if anyone objected to the union, Thomas's hand tightened on Violet's, both of them tensing, but the church remained silent. Marcus Brennan had left the territory, his pride too wounded to stay where everyone knew he had tried and failed to buy a wife. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister said. "You may kiss your bride." Thomas did, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. As they walked back down the aisle together, now husband and wife, Thomas felt like the luckiest man alive. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and food brought by seemingly everyone in town. There was music and dancing, laughter and joy. Violet danced with Miguel, with his sons, with Sheriff Carter, and with half a dozen other men from town. But she came back to Thomas every time, her eyes finding his across the crowd like he was her anchor. As the sun began to set, Thomas pulled her aside, leading her away from the crowd toward the small hill that overlooked his land. Their land now, he reminded himself. Everything he had was hers too. "Happy?" he asked, pulling her into his arms. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Violet said. "6 months ago, I was sleeping under your porch, terrified and alone. Now I am your wife. Sometimes it feels like a dream. If it is a dream, I never want to wake up." They stood together watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, the sounds of celebration drifting up from below. Thomas thought about the morning he had found Violet, the shock and confusion he had felt. He thought about the decision to help her, to build her a room, to stand against the men who wanted to control her. Every choice had led to this moment, to this woman in his arms, to this life they were building together. "I love you," Violet said softly. "I know I say it all the time, but I need you to know. I love you more than words can express." "I love you too," Thomas replied. "Always and forever." As night fell, they walked back to the house together. The guests were beginning to depart, calling out good wishes and congratulations. Miguel clapped Thomas on the shoulder, Rosa hugged Violet, and slowly the crowd thinned until it was just the two of them. Thomas carried Violet over the threshold of their home, and she laughed, holding tight to his neck. He set her down gently in the main room, this space that had been just his for so long and was now theirs together. "Welcome home, Mrs. Tucker," he said. "I like the sound of that," Violet said, reaching up to touch his face. "Mrs. Tucker, your wife." They made love that night with the kind of tenderness and passion that comes from truly knowing and trusting another person. Thomas was careful with her, mindful of her inexperience, and Violet was brave and curious, showing him a side of herself that no one else would ever see. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Thomas's bed, their bed now, talking quietly about their dreams for the future. "I want children," Violet said. "Lots of them. Enough to fill this house with noise and laughter." "How many is lots?" Thomas asked, amused. "4, maybe 5. I want them to grow up knowing they are loved and safe, that they have choices in their lives." She traced patterns on his chest with her finger. "I want them to know that family is not always about blood. It is about who shows up for you, who stands by you when things get hard." "We will need to build more rooms," Thomas said. "The house is not big enough for that many children." "Then we will build more rooms. We will make this place into a real home." And they did. Over the years that followed, Thomas and Violet expanded the house, adding a proper kitchen, 2 more bedrooms, and a wide front porch where they could sit in the evening and watch the sunset. The ranch prospered, the cattle herd growing year by year. Miguel's sons came to work for them full-time, and the operation became one of the most successful in the region. Their first child, a son they named Samuel, was born 10 months after their wedding. He had Thomas's dark hair and Violet's green eyes, and both parents were instantly besotted. A daughter, Emma, followed 2 years later, then another son, James, and finally twin girls, Grace and Hope. The house that had once been so quiet was filled with the sound of children's laughter, of running feet and excited voices. Violet proved to be a wonderful mother, patient and loving, but also firm when needed. She taught her children to read and write, to be kind to animals, to stand up for what was right. Thomas taught them about the land, about hard work and integrity, about the importance of helping those in need. When the children asked about how their parents met, Violet always told them the truth. She told them about running away from a man who thought he could buy her, about sleeping under their father's porch because she had nowhere else to go. She told them about Thomas's kindness, about the room he built her, about the way he stood up for her when dangerous men came calling. "Your father saved my life," she would say, "not just by giving me shelter, but by treating me like I mattered, like I had worth. He saw me when I was at my lowest and loved me anyway." "Your mother saved mine too," Thomas would add. "I did not even know I was lonely until she arrived and showed me what it meant to truly share your life with someone." The children grew up hearing this story, understanding from a young age that love was not about ownership or control, but about partnership and respect. They grew up watching their parents work side by side, making decisions together, supporting each other through hard times and celebrating the good times. One winter, when the children were all in bed and Thomas and Violet sat by the fire, she turned to him with tears in her eyes. "What is wrong?" He asked immediately. "Nothing is wrong," she said, smiling through her tears. "I was just thinking about that scared girl who fell asleep under your porch 13 years ago. I was so certain my life was over, that I would never be safe or happy again. And now look at us. Look at what we have built." Thomas pulled her close. "We built it together, every bit of it. I used to have nightmares about Marcus Brennan finding me, dragging me back. But I have not had one of those dreams in years. Do you know why? Why? Because I finally feel safe. Truly, completely safe. Not just physically, but in my heart. You gave me that, Tom. You gave me the space to heal, to grow, to become who I was meant to be." "You did the hard work yourself," Thomas said. "I just provided the room." Violet laughed. "You provided a lot more than a room. You provided a home, a family, a future I never thought I could have." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low. Outside, snow was falling softly, blanketing the ranch in white. Inside, their children slept peacefully, safe and loved. It was a far cry from that October morning when Thomas had found a terrified young woman hiding under his porch. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not decided to build you that room?" Thomas asked. "If I had just let you go, sent you on your way?" "I try not to think about it," Violet admitted. "I probably would have died in the desert, or been caught by Brennan, or fallen into some other terrible situation. But you did not let me go. You chose to help me, to fight for me, to love me. And that choice changed everything." "Best decision I ever made," Thomas said. Best decision we both made, Violet corrected. I chose to trust you to stay to fight for this life we could have together. We both made choices that led us here. As the years continued to pass, Thomas and Violet grew old together, their love deepening with time rather than fading. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, weathered droughts and harsh winters, rejoiced in the marriages of their children and the births of grandchildren. The ranch was passed down to Samuel, who ran it with the same integrity his father had shown. When Thomas was in his 60s, he suffered an injury while working with the cattle, breaking his leg badly. Violet nursed him through the recovery, just as he had once nursed her back from starvation and exhaustion. They took care of each other through sickness and health, just as they had promised on their wedding day. Still do not regret marrying a simple cattle rancher. Thomas asked one evening as they sat on their porch, both of them gray-haired now, their bodies bearing the marks of a life well lived. Not for a single second, Violet said, taking his hand. Though I would argue there is nothing simple about you, Tom Tucker. You are the most extraordinary man I have ever known. Took in one stray and she never stopped flattering me, Thomas teased. I am not a stray, I am your wife, your partner, your love. Yes, you are, and I am the luckiest man who ever lived. They watched the sunset together, as they had done thousands of times before. The land stretched out before them, dotted with cattle and marked by the buildings they had constructed together over the years. In the distance, they could see Miguel's son riding the fence line, continuing the work his father had started decades ago. The whole property thrummed with life and purpose. You remember what you said to me that first night after you built my room? Violet asked. You said I deserved better than what I had gotten from this world, and you were just trying to even the scales, I remember. You did more than even the scales, my love. You gave me everything. A home, a family, a life worth living. You gave me yourself, and that was the greatest gift I could have ever received. Thomas brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. The gift was mutual. You made me whole, Violet. You took a lonely man with an empty house and gave him a reason to wake up every morning with joy in his heart. As darkness fell, they went inside together, moving with the easy familiarity of two people who had spent a lifetime learning each other's rhythms. In their bedroom, the room that had once been Thomas's alone, they prepared for bed together. Violet brushed out her long hair, now more silver than dark, while Thomas checked that the doors were locked, a habit from those early days that he had never quite broken. They climbed into bed, and Violet curled against Thomas's side, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. It was how they had slept for nearly 40 years, and neither could imagine sleeping any other way. I love you, Violet whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Thomas replied. Always and forever. Always and forever, Violet echoed. And there, in the quiet of their bedroom, in the house they had built together on the land they had worked together, surrounded by the family they had raised together, Thomas and Violet drifted off to sleep. They had taken the broken pieces of their separate lives and forged them into something beautiful. They had turned fear into courage, loneliness into love, and uncertainty into the kind of deep, abiding partnership that poets write about and dreamers dream of. It had all started with a choice. Thomas's choice to offer help instead of anger when he found a frightened young woman sleeping under his porch. Violet's choice to trust him, to stay, to fight for her freedom. And then, the choice they made together every single day after that. To love each other, to build something meaningful, to create a life that honored the struggles they had overcome and celebrated the joy they had found. The girl who had once thought she had no choices, who had believed her life was over before it had truly begun, had instead found freedom and love in the arms of a good man who saw her worth, when she could not see it herself. The man who had been lonely without even realizing it had found his perfect partner, his other half, in the last place he expected to look. Their story became legend in Placitas and the surrounding area. People told it to their children and grandchildren, this tale of compassion and courage, of love conquering fear and hatred. The house still stood decades after Thomas and Violet passed away peacefully in their sleep within days of each other, having lived long, full lives. Their descendants kept the ranch running, maintaining the buildings and the land as a testament to what their ancestors had built. The room Thomas had constructed for Violet, that small addition with the door that locked from the inside, remained largely unchanged. Future generations of the Tucker family preserved it, understanding that it represented something important. The moment when everything changed, when two lives converged and were forever altered for the better. Because sometimes, the greatest love stories start not with love at first sight or grand romantic gestures, but with simple kindness, with seeing someone in need and choosing to help rather than turn away, with building a room for a stranger because everyone deserves a safe place to sleep, and in doing so, building a foundation for a love that would last a lifetime. Thomas had found Violet sleeping under his porch on that October morning in 1883. Instead of anger, instead of suspicion or fear, he had offered her compassion. He had built her a room inside his house, giving her not just shelter but dignity, privacy, and safety. And in return, she had given him something equally precious, her trust, her heart, her whole self. Together, they had built a life that was greater than the sum of its parts. They had raised children who understood the value of kindness and the importance of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. They had created a legacy that extended far beyond their own lifetimes. And it all started because one man chose to see a frightened young woman not as a problem or an inconvenience, but as a person worthy of help. Because one woman chose to trust again despite having every reason not to. Because two hearts, bruised and battered by life, found each other and healed together. In the end, that is what love is. Not the absence of scars, but the willingness to help each other heal. Not the promise of perfection, but the commitment to face imperfection together. Not the fairy tale beginning, but the choice to keep choosing each other, day after day, year after year, through all the challenges and triumphs that life brings. Thomas and Violet had that kind of love. The kind that starts with a room built from lumber and nails, but becomes a home built from trust and devotion. The kind that transforms two separate lives into one shared journey. The kind that endures not because it is easy, but because both people decide it is worth fighting for. Their story ended not with drama or tragedy, but with peace and contentment. They lived long enough to see their children grown and happy, their grandchildren thriving, their ranch prospering. They lived long enough to know that the choices they had made, the risks they had taken, had all been worth it. They lived long enough to understand that finding each other, against all odds, had been the greatest gift either of them could have received. And when they died, within days of each other as couples sometimes do, when they have been together so long they cannot imagine existing apart, they left behind a legacy of love, courage, and compassion that continued to inspire generations to come. Their story reminded people that kindness matters, that love can bloom in the most unlikely places, and that sometimes the best things in life come not from grand plans or careful scheming, but from simple human decency and the courage to follow your heart. The ranch house still stands in Placitas, New Mexico, though the area has changed significantly from what it was in 1883. But the bones of Thomas and Violet's home remain, a testament to what they built together. And on quiet evenings when the wind blows just right, some say you can still feel the love that filled those rooms, the warmth of a family built on foundations of respect and partnership, the echo of laughter from children who grew up knowing they were cherished. It is a love story for the ages, proof that the best romances are not about sweeping someone off their feet or grand gestures of passion, but about showing up, day after day, and choosing to build something beautiful together. About seeing someone at their worst and loving them anyway. About taking broken pieces and creating something whole. Thomas found Violet sleeping under his porch. Instead of anger, he built her a room inside his house. And in doing so, he built a life, a love, and a legacy that would endure long after they were both gone. It was a simple beginning to an extraordinary story, and it all started with one choice: to be kind when kindness was needed most. That choice changed 2 lives forever, and in changing those lives, it created ripples that spread outward, touching countless others. It proved that one person can make a difference, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that home is not a place, but the person who makes you feel safe enough to finally stop running. Thomas and Violet Tucker built that home together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. And their story reminds us all that no matter how dark things seem, no matter how lost or alone we feel, there is always hope. There is always the possibility that kindness will find us when we need it most. There is always the chance that love will arrive in unexpected packages, at unexpected times, in unexpected places. Sometimes, love comes in the form of a cowboy who finds you sleeping under his porch and decides to build you a room instead of turning you away. Sometimes, it comes in the form of a woman brave enough to run toward freedom and trust enough to stay when she finds it. Sometimes, the greatest love stories are the ones that start with the smallest acts of compassion and grow into forever. This was Thomas and Violet's story. It was messy and complicated and beautiful and real. It was a love story set in the harsh reality of the Old West, where survival was not guaranteed and happy endings were hard-won. But they fought for their happy ending, both of them together. And they got it. They got the life they dreamed of, the family they wanted, the love they deserved. They got to grow old together, to watch the sunset from their porch, to fall asleep in each other's arms night after night for decades. They got there forever, and it all started with a room. A simple room with 4 walls, a door that locked from the inside, and a window that let in the light. A room that said, "You are safe here, you are valued here, you are home." That room became a metaphor for everything Thomas gave Violet: safety, respect, choice, love. And what Violet gave Thomas in return was equally precious: trust, partnership, joy, purpose. Together, they created something neither could have built alone. That is the power of love. That is the magic of 2 people who choose each other and keep choosing each other, no matter what obstacles stand in their way. That is what Thomas and Violet Tucker proved with their lives. Love is not just a feeling. It is an action. It is building a room for someone who needs shelter. It is standing up to men who would do harm. It is choosing patience over anger, understanding over judgment, compassion over convenience. It is showing up, day after day, and doing the work of loving someone fully and completely. Thomas and Violet did that work. They lived that love. And because they did, they got there happily ever after. Not the fairy tale version where everything is perfect, but the real version where 2 imperfect people love each other through the imperfections and build something extraordinary in the process. Their story ended as it should, with peace, with satisfaction, with the knowledge that they had lived well and loved deeply. They left the world better than they found it. their children carrying forward the lessons they had taught, their grandchildren benefiting from the stability they had created, their great-grandchildren walking the land they had tended with such care. The Tucker Ranch thrived for generations, a living monument to what Thomas and Violet had started. And every new generation learned the story of how it all began, with a frightened young woman sleeping under a porch and a kind-hearted man who chose to help her instead of turning her away. That choice, that single moment of compassion on an October morning in 1883, set in motion a chain of events that created a legacy of love lasting well over a century. It proved that the smallest acts of kindness can have the biggest impacts, that love can grow in the most unlikely circumstances, and that happy endings are possible even for those who have every reason to believe they are not. Thomas and Violet Tucker found each other when both needed it most. They saved each other, built a life together, and loved each other until their very last breaths. Their story is a reminder that love is always worth fighting for, that kindness costs nothing but returns everything, and that home is anywhere you are with the person who sees your worth and cherishes your heart. It is a story of hope, of redemption, of two broken pieces fitting together to create something whole and beautiful. It is a love story in its truest, deepest sense, not about perfection or ease, but about commitment and choice and the daily decision to build something meaningful together. And that is how Thomas Tucker and Violet Morgan became Thomas and Violet Tucker, partners in life and love, building a legacy that would last long after they were gone. All because he found her sleeping under his porch and chose compassion over anger, building her a room and, in doing so, building a future neither could have imagined but both deserved. Their love story ended not with a question mark or an ellipsis, but with a period. A full stop. A complete and satisfying conclusion to a life well lived and a love well earned. They got there forever, and they made the most of every single day of it. And that is the best kind of love story there is.